I'm a big believer in the ripple effect. And when we meet with international school groups and leaders, I do like to remind them of their responsibility in the sector, that they have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of students underneath them. And if they are not innovating, then nobody else is, because they are in that position.
Our guest today wants to bring quality education to every single student on the planet. David Harkin launched 8 Billion Ideas in 2021 in the wake of the pandemic, when the challenges of remote education were thrown into stark relief, with teachers and students alike unprepared for the demands of the modern world. Now in 2025, 8 Billion Ideas has impacted 1 million students across 26 countries, growing year on year, and David and his team strive to reach their lofty goal of reaching all 8 billion people on the planet. Hello and welcome to Homegrown DXB, the show taking you inside the lives of people changing yours right here in the UAE. I'm your host, Amar Bati, and I'm delighted to have with me today David Harkin, the CEO of 8 Billion Ideas. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
It's a pleasure. So I want to start with, 8 Billion Ideas itself. The name is very evocative. And I'm wondering, where does this name come from? When you're saying 8 billion ideas, what do you really mean?
And I'm a walking billboard as well.
You got on your shirt.
So you got to make sure you got it out there so you can't forget it. But the premise of it was there's 8 billion people on the planet. Every single person out there has an amazing imagination. Everybody's got ideas, always coming up with stuff. So when we came up with the name, it was linked to that, the 8 billion people on the planet. How can we connect them with their own ideas for the use of education? So it was one of those moments when you come up with a name, you go, actually, that sounds good. And I think it's really important to have that stickable name, particularly in education, so people remember it.
That's a lofty goal, right? to reach, 8 billion people, the entire planet. Is that something that you think, you might do in the future?
100%. I like to think big, dream big, and really aim for the kind of stars. And there's 2 billion children out there, so 8 billion people on the planet. So our first priority right now is servicing schools all around the world, encouraging students to think big, to dream big, and give them the skills that they need for the future. But the ambition of the business is to go way beyond the student in the classroom, because everyone is a student, whatever age it might be. So I definitely believe we can get there at some point in the future.
I like it. I like the ambition. That's what I say. So I wanted to take a step back to sort of your and your co-founder's initial idea that would would become 8 billion ideas. I think you conceptualized this, if I'm not mistaken, sort of during the pandemic, if that's right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of us sort of reevaluated our lives, and certainly, as a parent myself, I have to say I found education quite lacking, in distance learning. I think it was something that was, people just weren't ready for, right? Yeah. So I'm curious, what was your personal experience like? I know you're a parent as well.
Yeah.
During the pandemic, and what led to the creation, to the spark inspiration for 8 billion ideas?
Yeah. So firstly, I am a dad of 3 boys. So not only being an EdTech founder and seeing what happens in schools all around the world, but I see what happens at home as well with my boys, Toby, Harry, and Ben, who are 9, 7, and 3. But if we go back to the pandemic, pre-pandemic, I was running a services company in schools, going into schools and teaching certain subjects. And we always saw a lot of challenges. We focused on entrepreneurship, but there were so many other areas that schools really needed help and support. And then the pandemic came along, and there were some really interesting situations and really interesting innovative moments as well. And in fact, there was a gentleman from the United Kingdom called Joe Wicks who did PE with Joe for 30 days. And he taught 4 million children PE through the screen. And schools around the world were changing their timetable to start their virtual learning day with a home PE lesson. And as I was watching Joe with my co-founder, we were considering that this was actually quite a remarkable moment in education, that nobody had ever engaged with students through the screen like Joe was doing. And so the idea really...
What was Joe doing that was so effective?
He was doing a 9 o'clock PE lesson every single day through the first 30 days of the pandemic. So he was a personal trainer. He wasn't a trained PE teacher, but he decided that he was going to try and do good and help students all around the world. It was amazing. Schools around the world, wherever they were changing their timetable to do PE with Joe. And so he would do a hit class for 20 minutes through the screen. And do you know what? It gave family structure. It was a really interesting moment that I think in education has been overlooked because nobody up until that point had taught millions of children through the screen before. And we were watching it and considering some of the harder to teach subjects. So today we concentrate on entrepreneurship, well-being, performance, financial literacy, sustainability, technology, careers, and leadership, all areas that schools have struggled with globally. And we were watching what Joe was doing, thinking maybe if we use the screen a little bit differently in the classroom and we built out what we call the critical curriculum, those different areas, that the screen could be used really engaging, innovatively. And that's how we started. But we always had this idea of a dash of services, that it wouldn't just be content that you're using in the classroom, that the 8Build team would be out there in schools, seeing the students to really resonate with them. So that was the piece. So it went from a very difficult moment, from running a business which couldn't operate, a challenging moment at home with the boys and thinking, what are we going to do? How are we coping? To thinking, actually, maybe post the pandemic, if we put a lot of energy into it and we jump into that edtech space, we could build something really special.
How did you identify? I mean, you mentioned things like entrepreneurship, financial literacy, things of our financial, I guess, acumen.
Yeah.
I'm probably not using the right term.
Yeah.
How did you identify that those were the areas that you think were lacking in education?
Do you know what? It was simply listening. It was observing and watching what was going on in schools. And every time I was in schools, they would be asking me, do you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? And then listening to the parents as well. So there's a bit of a push there. And when we started off the journey, we always had in our vision 8 pillars of 8 Bill. And it wasn't to link back to the number, but we felt like there was going to be more than just one of these pillars. And we had different names for them, and we gradually were watching what was going on, what governments were asking for their schools and their students to have. And that's as we gradually built out the 8 pillars over the last four academic years. And fundamentally, we did open up with a slogan which we decided was a bit too passive aggressive in "we teach what schools don't teach." And then we felt
that was your customers or some of the schools maybe didn't like that.
Exactly.
Right?
We had that for about 2 hours, that slogan, on launch day. And we didn't get any direct feedback, but I felt like it was a bit too competitive in a sector which is actually quite tough. Schools have quite a lot of challenges wherever they are across the world. They're brilliantly busy places. They're highly emotional places as well. So we changed that slogan very, very quickly. But fundamentally, I guess it is a little bit true that schools do struggle to teach those areas of education because they are so busy, so much is going on, and you take career education, it's changing so rapidly that schools just do not have departments big enough to be on the hottest topics in those areas. So that's where we come in.
So let's take a step back, because you talked about launch day there. What happened, I guess, between you having this epiphany, right, with your co-founder? You're like, oh, you know what? We can maybe use the screen. We can use new technology to reach people in a different way. To getting to launch day, what iterations did you have of the business leading up to launch? What were some of maybe the ideas you cast aside on your road to launch? What was that period like?
Oh, crazy busy. I think if you speak to any founder and they talk about that build up to launch. Now, remember, this is probably an unusual launch, that this is a launch in a pandemic period. So launching
was in 2021.
Yes, moving into early 2021. And you got to remember the world was obviously changing so rapidly. This wasn't a traditional launch, maybe post the pandemic or now most recently. There was no calmness in the world, was there? It was busy. So I guess you've got that constant excitement as well, that you're building up to something. Behind the scenes, and I haven't talked about it, but happy to talk about it today, is that we had a bigger challenge to deal with. We had a collapse of a private equity deal that was signed to help launch the business, and the capital was never received. So we had not only
what was that like? I mean, I assume you were all, prior to the collapse, you were all like, we've got it settled, ready to go, high fives all around, and then this sort of just blindsides you.
Yeah, I mean, massively hard. You build a business and you're dealing with COVID in the first instance, where business models are just literally torn apart overnight. Then you start and you build something in terms of what 8 Bill is going to become. You think you've got the right partner in terms of you, and now it just collapses from nowhere. But you've still got a launch date. You've still got you've committed. You're starting to build your team. You're building out your product. You're building your software. That was tough, right? Really, really, really tough. And I guess for me, that there was one particular point where I realized that capital wasn't going to come. and it's suddenly the survival mode kicks in. We're committed to this. We're doing this. And do you know what? We decided to go back to, well, we went to the angel community. We told them what we were doing, and we had a certain amount of capital that we had to raise in a week to be able to launch. We had the platform, we had payroll, we had
So
bills.
when did this collapse happen, actually? So you say you're talking about you had to do this in a week.
Yeah,
Was it
so
before launch?
we signed in late 2020, about December, January time, or just beginning of the year, what was the largest ed tech private equity deal in the world, which is quite convenient. At the beginning of the year, it was 10 days in, so we had that headline. But we were aggressive in terms of launch. We didn't want to wait until the middle of the year or later in the year, so it was the first week of April. So there was equity due in that lead up, and when you have a deal in place like that, you're ready to rock and roll, and you're investing in thousands of hours of development to get your platform up and running, and you're building that team. You're building the team to launch the product that you're going to take to market, and then when it doesn't come, it's like, okay, what are we going to do it? And that was difficult, but in a way, it was the best thing which ever happened to us and to me, because when you're in a situation like that, which is rare, it's tough. You have to go back to the drawing board. You have to think really quickly under pressure. But also, I think a lot of entrepreneurs will talk about the fact that their first and second connection, that the network they build over a lifetime normally kind of really picks you up in those moments. And so we decided at that point, private equity will leave for a little bit longer. It wasn't time to put a new deal in place, and therefore to raise capital via the angel community. And we raised it rapidly to get going, and forever grateful for those people which supported us. So at the time, it was we had a few days to fix it, and we did, and those people are still involved in the business today.
So what was launch day like then?
Well, by the time we got over that and we're ready, because remember, you're launching, you put a date in the ground, your platform's going live, this other issue you're just dealing with, and it's just that exhilaration. You're right, it's coming together, but then quickly you're learning. I tell young entrepreneurs, and any kind of entrepreneur, is like the kind of famous phrase of, you've got to fail fast, right? But also often everybody's weighing everything to be perfect, and it's got to do this, it's got to do that. No, just get it up and running, right? You're going to learn quicker. We learned about the logo, the slogan, to change that quite quickly, because that was out there. But I guess there is still that moment of being really proud that you've done it, but it's kind of a blur. It just happens, right? Because then as soon as it's up and running and your customers are coming, and then schools want to work with you, you're just into this rapid race. And it's very hard. I don't think anybody's asked me that in years, what the launch day was, because I haven't really reflected on it for a long time.
Well, there's that blur, right? That moment, and I'm sure the exhilaration. But when did you, I guess, realize that it was, for lack of a better word, real? Like that the business hadn't just launched, but there were people interested in it, that it was that it had engagement, that it had schools, students that were connecting with it. What point would you say that you took a step back and like, this is working, this is coming together?
Do you know what? I wouldn't even say. I think it was probably a couple of years in, right? So it was still obviously a very young company, for turning 5 years. Coming up. So to me, it was a blur and felt like a blur in a great way. Like, you're running off adrenaline.
Does it still feel like that?
Yeah. A little bit. I'd say it's in the last few months you started to realize. I think there was a slide we created as a team which really showed our schools and our parents the product architecture of where we're going. And I looked at that, and it was presented to a well-known group here locally, and I was like, yeah, that looks cool now. Like, that's where we were going to get to. But you could visualize it, you could see it. But no, I think, it always feels like a blur in that kind of scale up phase. But there are a few moments you do pinch yourself and go, wow, okay. And you're going, we've got 25 different countries around the world. Schools are approaching us and saying, we want you in our school. So that's really interesting. When you go, well, what type of school? What curriculum have you got? British, IB, American, Indian. So we've got loads of different curriculums, different parts of the sector. You go, hang on, we're building something really cool here. Like, we're building something which is solving problems in schools all around the world. And we are not really marketing the business, right? Which is frustrated and excited. I say to the team that, we're growing by word of mouth. We're growing by teachers using our product and then moving and saying, can you come and work in this new school in Dubai or wherever it might be across the world? And that's really exciting. So I think there's two moments for me. When I saw our kind of product vision really presented in a way that was in the back of my head, and I could see the reaction from head teachers and principals in a room, I was like, this is cool. And then secondly, you do reflect and you look at the logos and the schools that you're working with and going, there's something remarkable about this business and what we're doing. It genuinely is something remarkable. Like nobody's done what we've done globally. They might do it in one part of the pillar, one part of the sector, certain fee paying. We're like, no, because my brief has been never turned down an educational brief. If a school needs us to help in some sort of capacity, we will find a way. And it's proven to be the right course so far.
So you mentioned again, like how many different schools you work with, the fact that you'll have disparate briefs from different schools, different clients. And I'm curious to how you sort of build a unified curriculum.
Mm-hmm.
But then that can apply to, was it 250 schools, something like that?
Just 300 now. So
300.
Yeah, right. It's moving.
Going up.
Yes. Yeah, we'll check the watch. There's a few more now.
A few more. But yes, you have so many schools and so many different countries, right?
Yeah.
And I imagine, they have different needs and different cultures and different contexts. How do you have a company that can accommodate for that level of sort of nuance and I guess specificity in curriculum?
Yeah, it's a great question. So look, we started off with the challenge of look what was going on globally in the economy, what was going on, what parents were talking about, what students were saying they wanted to learn. So the first pillar was entrepreneurship. To me, it's a missing gem in education that people don't understand how powerful this topic can be to young people. Like 70% of secondary school students want to start a business, right? They're fascinated by it. So to us,
do you have someone as a mentor for entrepreneurship for you or classes in that regard?
I would, yes, I've had great people around me, I'd say, but you find those great people you've kind of known throughout the whole of your life. And there's different people you go to get something off your chest or for some advice. But I've just gradually over the years just met great entrepreneurs, great founders who sometimes you talk to, or sometimes you kind of watch from a distance and you learn from. But in answer to the question, we started realizing that the pillars we were designing were global issues. But we also, if you bring it closer to home and you have those 8 pillars of education, and we've trademarked the phrase, the critical curriculum, because I didn't like the phrase extra. Like the areas we work in, people talk about them saying the extra. Entrepreneurship's extra, leadership's extra, well-being's extra. I'm like, how can it be extra? Like these are the most critical areas that young people need to learn about. So we trademarked that phrase, the critical curriculum, for a school leader to be able to really explain it to their parents about why they were bringing it into the school. But when you present those 8 pillars and you see a principal, every principal, no matter if it's in Dubai, London, New York, wherever it might be, their eyes are drawn to a different part of the critical curriculum, because in their school, it's different to the school down the road. So it doesn't really matter if it's 25 schools across the world or 25 schools here. Every principal will want something different from 8bill. So we've kind of covered a lot of bases by being ambitious in terms of what we're doing. But when you build great education, you're then having to consider how can our entrepreneurship pillar or leadership pillar or financial literacy pillar be relevant and be used for children all over the world. And with a drive to more of a global education system and preparing students to be citizens of the world, which is different to maybe 10, 20 or 30 years ago, that really kind of plays into what we're doing at 8 billion ideas.
So I wanted to pick up on something you mentioned there in your last answer about your curriculum being extra, right? You're not wanting to use the word extra, right? Which is why you have the critical curriculum.
Yeah.
Why do you think that those particular areas and fields were, I guess, considered extra for so many years?
I think when you walk into a school and you go into any school across the entire planet, there is so much going on in the school you can't imagine. I talk about all the levels of emotion that you've got from students, teachers, parents, that schools are brilliantly busy places. And when they're brilliantly busy places, it's hard to sometimes keep up with what really needs to be happening. I think that's number one. Number two, I think those areas have been neglected. They have not been at the forefront of education for too long. Again, because the world has just changed so much in the last 5, 10, 20 years. So there's so many different reasons, whether it's Dubai or anywhere across the world, that schools have always been trying to do something, is a phrase that I use, something. But how do you move from being something to strategic, right, in critical areas for young people? So there's so many different reasons. One, because schools are so busy. Secondly, because these areas of education as well have just moved on so much in the last period of time. So I don't think whenever I present the 8 pillars, there's not a head teacher or a principal out there which is looking at it and going, we're not doing something in this space, but we definitely know we need to do more. We just don't have the resource. We don't have the people. We don't have those people to call on to go teach this. And that's where we come in. So I like to think that we've become a department, an extended department to schools. So where they have their history, their chemistry, their maths department, they've got their 8 bill department, which takes care of all these future skills that we're working on.
Did you always imagine yourself in education? Is that something that you sort of was, I don't know, was a career goal, aspiration for yourself, when you were in school or when you graduated?
Yeah, it's funny. And my mum reminded me about a conversation I had when I was 8 or 9 years old, that I said that I wanted to be in business, I wanted to be a teacher in an education, and I wanted to be in politics, to make an impact at some particular point. And
All of those
all
things.
of that, I was not fussed. I was like aiming high, like I wanted to do all of these different things. And in a weird way, being a business owner in education, you kind of do the whole of those things, all three things. So you're in business. So I run an ed tech company, which is a business. So you've got that side of it. It's in education, which to me is the best sector on the planet. And there's always an element of politics, right? When you're working in education. And I feel like when I said that as a child, I really meant it. And fundamentally, it wasn't always going to be a straight path of teaching, doing X, Y, and Z. It was going to be building something that could have a big ripple and big impact across the planet. So my mum reminded me of that conversation. And it's not the normal path of getting into education, but it's my path.
So, I mean, before you, I think you had your company prior to the pandemic, you were working at IBM.
Yes. Yeah.
So at the time, then I suppose that was just pure tech, right? There was no education in that at all. What were some of the things I think that maybe, or that what are some of the things that you perhaps took from your time there that you transferred into 8 billion ideas?
Yeah, I loved my time at IBM. I was on the director's path. I had some fantastic managers and senior vice presidents, which really looked after me. And about 6 or 7 years into that journey, I had that kind of inner frustration that this conversation I had with my mum many years ago. I was like, how am I going to move from this innovative business corporate world? How am I going to go make my dream a reality of doing something big in education? But I was really well supported. IBM has actually breeds quite a lot of entrepreneurs in different industries. So for me, it was a great grounding, but it was more than that. There was a lot of lessons I took from my early career, and also a great network of just great people that you met. When you run a business, there's you take the best out of everything you've learned in life, and for me, what IBM and that corporate world really taught me was there is an element of structure you have to bring into a business, right? But then you've also got that conflicting piece that you don't want too much structure when you're growing. You don't want to be too set on your ideas. You don't want to be too fixed-minded, because you do have to pivot a lot and be agile, and you're constantly problem solving. But I feel rather than a complete raw or new entrepreneur, having that corporate background was actually quite wise, because there's bits of that you want to nick, right? Or you want to progress and bring into your own organization in the future. And that little bit of structure, I think, was always in the back of my head, that I knew I needed that structure to build a scalable business going forward. And I guess that's what IBM gave me.
Well, I was speaking of pivoting. I imagine, you said yourself, it's happened a lot. You've had challenges. You had the financial sort of challenge prior to launch. Were some of the things that you didn't expect that came up, some of the challenges that you encountered? How did you pivot? Is there anything you would have done differently looking back?
I this question about do I ever regret or would do anything differently? I can honestly say the answer is no. Because we wouldn't be having this conversation now. It's just millions of moments which come together and collide to crystallize to create the moment that you're in. So I never would do anything differently. Have I made mistakes? Have I frustrated people at times because I'm running at such a pace? Yeah, of course I have. But the intent has always been good. The intent is always to build something bigger than me, bigger than all of us, bigger than, make a big impact on the planet. So I look back and I go, how do we get through that? And those moments often happen with entrepreneurs and business owners quite regularly. I'm really proud that we had the resilience, not just me, but the team. Great set of shareholders and backers as well. I had the resilience to go forward. But I don't regret anything. I wouldn't change anything, because it just, today we sit in a very special place. We sit in a place where we're having this kind of conversation. We've got the opportunity to work with remarkable businesses and individuals to improve our education. And, in a flash, we've worked with 1 million children in the last 4 years in every learning environment across the world. So I can't, maybe if one thing changed, that wouldn't have happened, but it set us up perfectly now for the next chapter. And I think that's really key with entrepreneurs. Keep finding your energy, keep raising the bar about what you want to do. And it's really, we've defined the new era as 8 billion ideas 2.0, and it's only 3 or 4 years into the business because we've learned a lot in that first startup scale up phase. So
What are some of the things you learned?
we've learned to pivot a lot. We've learned to listen a lot, and don't be afraid of building new products or new courses or listening to your gut instinct. Don't turn down, don't get caught in the trap of like some of the lessons that entrepreneurs or the phrases that people use, like nail one problem and scale it. That's a common thing that people often say. It's like, just build one product, scale that. No, if you're going to build something and you see opportunities and they relate to your mission as a business, go explore them, right? Go do it. So there's just been so many lessons learned. But what we did feel, and the reason why we're defining ourselves now as 8 billion ideas 2.0, is because we've had that stretch across education and that breadth and depth in terms of what we do. We could come across a little bit complicated because we work in all of these schools, because we do the 8 pillars. So we're working really hard on our positioning that busy parents, busy teachers, busy CEOs can land on our website, get, fall in love with what we're trying to achieve, but then work out quickly what problem we can solve them. So that's been a big part of our work in the last 6 months, is how do we position ourselves much better?
Well, speaking of positioning yourself, you're here in Dubai, which is
Yeah.
great. So we're happy to have you.
Thank you.
What brought you, I guess, to Dubai in the first place? And, what is it, I guess, about Dubai that makes sense, makes it a good place for 8 billion ideas?
I just absolutely love everything about Dubai. Just the pace, the ambition, the speed of decision making. And it's a very unique place, right? In terms of, now the population is growing, but there's just opportunity. So many different reasons. But obviously, as we were establishing and growing, this is becoming the heartbeat of education globally. And I think sometimes we forget that in Dubai. We forget that the rest of the world is watching what is happening in this part of the world. And it's very uniquely placed that it's incredibly competitive. I don't think you have a higher footprint of schools in such a short space, in such a small space compared to anywhere else across the world. And that just breeds creativity. It means that schools are always trying to raise the bar in terms of what's happening in the classroom. So it was kind of a no-brainer to make sure that we were here as well. So many different reasons, but and also it is much more of a face-to-face culture, which when you start a business in a pandemic and there's the rise of remote working and virtual working, I don't do great sitting behind a desk all day. Like, I love to get out and meet people and see our students and see our parents and see our schools. So that was a big draw to Dubai.
Well, I mean, you've certainly had quite a bit of success with, well-known, well-regarded brands here, schools, companies here, I should
Yeah.
say, like Gems, Adar, I think Bloom, to name a few.
Yeah.
Um, you know, how did those partnerships come about? Was it something where they approached you? Did you actively seek them out? And sort of how do you work with each of those partners?
So we have genuinely grown by word of mouth and by teachers, and working with teachers who then move. They work with you in one place and they take you to the next place. And I remember listening to the podcast of the founder of Airbnb. And he said, and it really hit with me when I listened to that podcast, was when you get your first 10 customers, like, really look after your first 10 customers. Don't think about the next 10 customers, because you got your first 10 and they grow from there. Then when you get to 100, then when you get to 1,000, do everything you possibly can to look after them. And that really stuck with me. And when we had the opportunity, when schools work with you for the first time, they know you're a startup. They know you're a scale up. They know your ambition. They know it's always not going to be a straight line sometimes with the delivery, but they know the intent is strong. They know where it could go. And so 3-4 years ago, when you've got those principles going, I like the sound of this company, I can see the impact it's going to make, we're going to jump into this as a partnership, then you jump on those partnerships. And we had some amazing principals, and they know who they are, who are listening, who gave us those opportunities. And then once you do that in one place, very quickly that person talks. And the sector is remarkably big, but remarkably small as well in terms of the international heads all around the world. So then when they talk, and then suddenly you find yourself into, well, let's do something strategic. If you're a school group of 5, 10, 50, 100, whatever it might be, why don't we consider how we put some fundamental structure in place through a partnership, really understand what a partnership is. I don't like the phrase being a supplier. A supplier is very different to a partnership. And education needs partnerships to really flourish. So it always starts with just a conversation, and then it means that you do your best you possibly can in that conversation for that partner and for that client. They talk about you, and then hopefully over time you can bring some structure to a relationship. And we've done very well, and it feels like we're only getting started as well in the region to build more of those, because fundamentally that allows you to make more ripples. I'm a big believer in the ripple effect, and when we meet with international school groups and leaders, I do like to remind them of their responsibility in the sector, that they have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of students underneath them. And if they are not innovating, then nobody else is, because they are in that position. And normally when we have that kind of conversation, it's like, how do we then bring some strategy to this, a little bit of structure to it? And quickly the conversation grows into something which is powerful and impactful.
So, and that line, I guess, or in line with the idea of innovating. As you said, you're an ed tech company. You're leveraging technology to provide, services, education, curriculum in a way that hasn't been done before. To your mind, what do you think it is about modern forms of communication technology that is really powerful or beneficial for the education space? And how do you see yourself technology transforming the space?
I think just the whole tech topic is really interesting. It's always been around in education. It's probably highlighted more than ever because there's a bit of a gap in knowledge about what is going to happen. But I often talk about, where we were with tech 10, 20, 30 years ago, when the first computer was coming to a school and everybody didn't know what it was going to be. And then with the rise of Google and search engines, people were nervous about what impact that was going to have. This is no different, right? It's a disrupt. And I think you've only got the opportunity to embrace it, but also it's an opportunity to redefine education. Teacher workload, retention, recruitment is a challenge globally because teachers are burnt out in most places across the world because they're being asked to do too much. So when we've got tools and tech which is on the rise to help us in the classroom, we need to kind of drop the shoulder, not drop the shoulders. We need to be a little bit more open about how can we bring this in and just redefine the teaching job. So platforms have always existed. I think there's a gap and a little bit of nervousness now. But for me, I just see an opportunity. How do we speed up our work? Even just on a day-to-day basis, being dyslexic and managing my inbox and comms around me is real challenging. But with ChatGPT, with different things there, you can speed things up. It's making me more efficient in terms of the amount of comms that I'm able to send out and deal with. So I think you've got to break it down into different areas. I think generally tech globally, we've not been quick enough in education to really embrace it. I think we just need to acknowledge the gaps there and not be frightened of them. They've always existed in innovation. And then for us at 8bill, anything which helps us with our mission, which is about giving students the skills and belief to change the world and doing it quicker and to more students around the world, then why would we not embrace it? And that includes using tech as much as we possibly can in our platform and what we plan in the years ahead.
Just to carry on the discussion around AI, because I think there's a lot of debate around AI in the education space, good and bad, right?
Yeah.
And you used a great example of how it can be very helpful for you individually. But there's definitely a concern that, students, particularly in higher education space, can be using things like large language models as a crutch, right? Something to help them write their papers for them or do their research for them. And maybe I'm building some of those fundamental skills that they need to then properly utilize the tools like AI as they go forward into the future. Is that something that you think about when you're conceptualizing your curriculum? And I guess just what's your general take on that?
Yeah, absolutely. And as a dad, right, I'm constantly thinking about it. So with our tech pillar, we've had a slightly different approach. So when I talk about a pillar of education, we're building education currently all the way from 2 to 18, so 2-year-olds to 18-year-olds for schools to utilize. So with our tech pillar used in schools, it's more how do you live on rather than in a tech world. So that's the approach that we've been taking. How do you kind of rise above it? Okay, it's been what we wanted to do and teach students. And then, it does concern me. I don't think anybody's got the quite answers yet now. And those university students, those students at the top end of school, things are rapidly moving. All I would just say is things have been disruptive. Maybe right now we're facing a decade where it's the most disruption that we've ever seen, or speed of innovation that we've ever seen in terms of what's going on. But it will be okay. But I think if students do there's a phrase, stuck and dive, or they try and cheat their way through their exam, like, you will get found out, right? It will, because the world fundamentally does need an individual which is creative and is a problem solver. And that's the thing that I talk about to parents right now, where you go, well, we don't really know what's going to happen. And I don't think anybody out there can really claim all of that. But what you can do, and this goes back to my favorite subjects of history, is you can look in the past. And the World Economic Forum always published lists about what do kids need by 2025, 2030, 2040, whatever it might be. Interestingly, if you look at all the published lists for the last 30, 40 years in the top 10 skills that they require a student will need to survive, there are only 2 skills which are consistently in that top 10, which nobody's talking about. I don't know why, because we just have to look back. And that's creativity and problem solving. So today's, the turn of the year 2025, 2026, in 50 years' time, 2075, will we still need students who are creative and problem solvers, whatever's going on in the tech space? The answer is yes. So yeah, I do think about it a lot. But I go back to that. And our place with this whole tech in education piece is that we've got a responsibility to help young people live in a tech world. Sorry, on a tech world, not in a tech world. Let me get that right. How do you live on it and not in it?
I mean, you talked about your sons there, and I certainly think about this myself as well. I look at the stuff they're learning in school, and as someone who's completely not an expert in that space at all, I have my own thoughts on things that are good and bad. I'm curious if you find yourself to be hypercritical of like the things that your kids are learning.
My boys,
yeah. Are you that parent that they dread seeing because you come down really hard on the teachers?
No, I think I see it from so many different perspectives, and I get asked a lot about my opinions of schools and, what do I want? And fundamentally, my children at our age where they're 9, 7 and 3, I want them to go to school and enjoy going to school, right? You've got to get that one right. Okay. And not every child does. I want them to go there and be happy, to build friendships, to be able to connect, and be part of a community. That's the bit we often miss. And as parents, we worry a lot about our children. We worry about examinations. We worry about X, Y, and Z. And I think, why are we worrying about the basics? So the first thing is your child happy? And are they part of a community, right? Because that community is going to be really important to now and into the future. I want my children to be active. Sport is a big part of my life. I want my children to be active in terms of what they do. And I know my wife, Jenny, feels exactly the same thing. I want my children to be kind, right? So a question we ask at the dinner table is not what you did at school today. What did you do which was kind, and make them more thoughtful in terms of how they grow up. Of course, when there's little bits of you, when you see something amazing in one school and you go, well, that's not quite happening here, or whatever it might be, you kind of have to bite your lip a little bit and not be that, that critical beast. Because when I walk into a school, or now I find myself walking into a restaurant, and because I've done so much CPD in the country, there's somebody in there who might recognize the brand or what you do. But I think you just balance it up. Like, the pressure that schools are under, when to raise something. But for me, I also feel like it's not just my school which has a responsibility to help with the education, that what me and my wife does at home is critically important. We forget that children are only at school for 15% of their waking hours, right? So we got to have our own education plan at home. So I'm not sure if I answered the question. Am I hypercritical? Maybe on a few little bits and pieces, but fundamentally, I've seen enough now. I've seen some of the best schools in the world, and I challenge the heads there. I think they could be better and push. And I've seen some challenging schools with different budgets, and they're at completely punching above their weight in their part of the sector. I just think we just got to go back to that first comment about, is the school building a sense of community for that young person? Start there, then the rest of the bit will be fine.
You talked about how important sport is to you and obviously to your family at large. And something I thought was really interesting about you is that you're an ultra marathon runner. So you're not just a runner, you're an ultra marathon runner, which, again, correct me if I'm wrong, I think means you've run like 100K in a day.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Why would I do that? Do you know what? I think it was maybe about 10 years ago that a friend of mine, I still was keeping fit. Love my cricket. It's my favourite sport. But as you get older, it's a bit harder to play cricket and just dedicate a whole day to the weekend of playing it when you've got a young family. And a friend of mine said, have you tried running? And I did my first half marathon. And I got given a medal. And I think you got given a medal, that sense of achievement. And when you've got...
Did you place? Did you podium?
No, not at that particular time. It's my first half marathon. It was an event. Maybe there was 2,500 runners. And I just enjoyed that sense of achievement.
But you still got a medal. You
Still got a medal, and
yeah.
I felt wicked. I felt great, and and when I started the business, and particularly the last few years, I talked about I've realised the importance of a third dimension. Okay, because it can be all in, it can be family, business, but what about something for me, right? To work on. And I started doing the half marathons, then built up to do the first marathon. And then there was just a time in my life a couple of years ago, it was like, right, I feel at a physical age that I could really push myself and just give something big a go. You can't always just do 100K. It takes a lot of training to get to that particular point. So I signed up for an amazing event and did it. Took yourself to some dark places, 60, 70K in. You're like, why am I doing this? But, was doing it for a great cause as well. And now I'm just completing 8 marathons in a year for another cause, which I'm doing right now. So to me, that third dimension, you definitely need, right? It is a stress reliever. It is a place that you go generate the ideas. Sometimes I love listening to podcasts. Sometimes I love the quietness of just listening to the road and the birds or whatever's going on. So it became my third dimension, and having those little physical challenges when you've got so much to do in the terms of the business, that it gives you focus, because it's very easy to let your fitness slip being an entrepreneur. There's just no time in the day. So, most of my days now start with a run. So that's kind of ticked off. I feel good and I'm in a better mood after it.
So I guess just to bring things home, what's the future for 8 billion ideas, other than obviously reaching all 8 billion people?
Do you know what? That is the future, right? We've got a long way to go. And some people will smile and smirk and go, it's impossible, but why not? Like, I believe, we have, education establishments out there which are running physical schools. There isn't, to me, a brand which represents education from 0 to 100 across the entire world. There'd be brands, there'd be certain people doing different pieces, but what we are building is critical. So for me, I want us to become the most irresistible and accessible education company that has ever existed in every corner of the globe, because every child I've ever met has an amazing imagination, but every child is on a different journey, wherever they are across the planet. So the product architecture we built, I think, really begins to show people what we're doing. Then when you bring in different language capabilities into what we're planning, when you start getting even more granular in terms of individuals rather than just classes, all of it is possible. Of course, there's challenges. There's some countries which are very difficult to reach. There's different tech challenges out there, but we're investing time in physical resources, not just our ed tech. We're consistently challenging what we're doing to keep redefining what we're going to be doing. So, and time will tell, won't it? I'll say it here, but can we do it? Like, why not?
Why not, right?
Someone's got to think big.
Yeah, what is one of those 8 billion ideas? We'll figure it out, right?
Exactly. And I tell you what, the personal branding, the simplicity of just wearing a shirt and getting your logo on it, then ask some questions. But yeah, that's the mission, and I'm very, very confident we're going to achieve it.
Well, I wish you all the best, David, in your mission. I think it's a wonderful aspiration, obviously, to bring education to everyone. Good luck, and thanks so much for being on Homegrown.
Thank you very much for having me.